So what is ECR rankings and how should you be using them in fantasy football? So obviously this video is for people who are a little bit newer and people who maybe only have a season or two under their belt in fantasy football. So ECR stands for Expert Consensus Rankings. So I know it's kind of confusing saying ECR rankings, but essentially speaking, because rankings is in the title. But Expert Consensus Rankings. Now, first off, we have to consider who are these experts. If you're looking on Fantasy Pros or other websites, usually it's a conglomerate of people. They'll show you how they did last season and the seasons before as far as how they rank players versus how they finished. I think there are certain people in ECR rankings that have some level of bias or rank people a little wonky, but when you combine 60 to 70 people together, usually you get a pretty good idea of where people should be going, because hopefully logic and statistics and tape prevail over how you feel that day when you're ranking. The nice thing about ECR rankings is that you're able to filter it based on league size, based on scoring formats. Maybe you have an 8-man, 10-man, 12-man league. Maybe you use standard scoring, half PPR, or full PPR scoring. I don't know if they do it for tight end premium, but I'm sure that they do. You're able to really filter this and kind of hone it down and really be able to get a better idea of how you should be drafting in your drafts if you have a certain league size or certain scoring format. What I will tell you though is do not take ECR rankings as church. Do not take them as the end all be all. So I guess this is like the one warning I'll give you. ECR rankings are not the answer. They are not the perfect draft. They are not going to be the exact way that you should be drafting in your draft. ECR rankings, in my opinion, are one, if you're not really comfortable or not really that familiar with football, kind of be used as a tool to kind of help you draft in your league. If you're somebody who's not necessarily new to football or has a little bit more of an in-depth knowledge of how football actually works, maybe you've done fantasy football 1 year before, then ECR rankings are definitely going to be more of a tool. What I would recommend is you can use ECR rankings along with other creators' rankings on YouTube, whether it's mine or somebody else's. You can combine these ECR rankings, combine them with somebody else's rankings, and kind of get even better of an average, especially if you find a content creator out there that you trust, because if you like their rankings, you can compare them to ECR and kind of like rank and file it from there. So how do you actually use the ECR rankings though? Well, like I said, if you can use ECR rankings, combine them with your own or some other content creators or somebody else out there on the internet's rankings, what this will help you do in your fantasy football drafts is really get an idea of where there's value based on the platform you're drafting on. So if you're drafting on ESPN or if you're drafting on Sleeper or Yahoo or maybe somewhere else entirely, you can use these rankings and maybe you'll see, okay, Nico Collins on Sleeper is going at pick 16. Okay, well, my ECR rankings and my rankings, I have them at pick 8. Okay, well, I'm drafting, at pick 9 or 10 in my 12-man league. I probably could take somebody else in the first round. And because a lot of drafts, unless it's like a really good group of people who know how to draft and have been playing fantasy football forever, a lot of times they get very chalky, which means it'll kind of go based on how the ADP on your site tells you to go. Yeah, some people will draft people a couple spots sooner, a couple spots later. Some people will fall. Some people might take a QB too early, whatever it may be. But by and large, I would say that the variance is probably 10 to 15% off of what the actual site's telling you to draft and in that draft order. If you're picking, let's say, number 10 out of 12 people, you wouldn't need to take Nico Collins with your first round pick at the 10th slot. You're going to pretty realistically know you could take somebody else who you might have a little bit higher, or maybe somebody else that you have slightly around where he's going on your rankings combined with ECR. And what you can do is you can say, okay, I'm going to take this guy on the turn when it comes back. So I guess that'd be 11, 12, 13, 14. At pick 15, that's one pick before he's supposed to go based on the website's ADP. I'm going to snag him. Now, this doesn't always work. Sometimes somebody will snipe you on a pick, but more often than not, you can find value on these picks that you can be waiting a little bit on that should be going higher in your drafts based on the rankings from ECR and your other rankings versus the site's ADP. This can also work in reverse, which is even better in my opinion. ECR rankings and your own personal rankings, or again, using a creator's rankings in combination with ECR, will help you know who to avoid. It's going to have players, let's say, for example, on your site, and again, I'm not saying this is true, but just as an example, it has DK Metcalf as pick 36 overall. Your ECR rankings might have him at pick like 62, and your personal rankings with some content creator, like when you have it all together, it has him at like pick 55. Okay, well, ADP on your site's 32, but your rankings have him at 55. What are you going to do? You are going to fade DK Metcalf. You're not going to draft him. You're going to let another league mate draft him that early, waste a draft pick, and you are going to avoid some of these landmine picks out there who are going way too high in fantasy football drafts. So that's pretty much what ECR Rankings is. That's how to compile them. That's how to use them to not only help you draft a little bit smarter as far as reaching on players that deserve to be reached on, but also how to kind of like fade players that deserve to be faded because of them being drafted too high in our fantasy football drafts. If you guys have any questions about this, if you need me to break it down a little bit further, please let me know, because again, I like making content for people who are new to fantasy football or maybe don't have as much of a strong footing in it. Because at the end of the day, trying to get people the truth, trying to help them win their fantasy football championships, which is hopefully what this video will do, is help you get just a little bit closer to winning your fantasy football championship in 2025. Hopefully, I'll see you guys again real soon. No, hopefully you guys will see me again real soon. Until then, y'all have a blessed day. Bye.